Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. In January 2019, we launched the What Fuels You podcast, and since that time, I have had the honor of featuring and highlighting leaders and their incredible stories. Though I'm eager to continue sharing these stories with you, I want to make space for different and relevant content for this unique and challenging time. While we all navigate the COVID-19 pandemic together, on this podcast and the upcoming ones, I'll be having more focused conversations with leaders to help answer questions, get key insights, and share stories of inspiration around how they and their teams are adapting during this new reality. I hope you enjoy these episodes of the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on this special episode of the What Fuels You podcast is Jeff Wald. Jeff is the founder of WorkMarket, an enterprise software platform that enables corporations to manage freelancers. WorkMarket was acquired by ADP in 2018. Jeff is also the author of a just-released book on the future of work called The End of Jobs. In response to the COVID-19 outbreak, WorkMarket is partnering with Volunteer Surge, a platform launched in response to the pandemic that is rapidly training 1 million volunteer community health workers to support frontline doctors and nurses and assist vulnerable populations during this national emergency. WorkMarket is providing the software to organize and manage all of the volunteers and the assignments that they accept. Thank you so much for this work. I love it. I loved connecting with you. I've been wanting you to be on the podcast, so welcome. Before COVID, I was wanting you to be on the podcast to talk about the book and WorkMarket. So I don't want to overlook those things. I think they're super important and especially relevant right now. You're on the forefront of what people are thinking about, but also super curious to know about the work that you're doing to get nurses to help the healthcare workers. So welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. I'm super excited to discuss these and all other kinds of things on your program.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it. So before we get started talking through all the things work and all the things that you're doing with Volunteer Surge, you're in New York, I'm in Seattle, two of the cities that got hit first with COVID. How is it feeling in New York right now?
You know, New York's been through a number of traumas, whether it was obviously 9/11 or being at the heart of the financial crisis in 07-08 because of the banking system. So New York knows how to respond. And there's a lot of resilience in the city, whether it's the nightly 7 p.m., everyone leaning out their windows and doing 2 minutes of clapping and cheering for the frontline workers, or just taking care of each other. It feels pretty great to be here. And so I've had many chances to flee, but this is my home and I will stand fast here.
Yeah. Are you one of those people who's not enjoying the quarantine, but who's finding time to kind of center and balance?
You know, I will tell you, there are ups and downs. There are times where it gets overwhelming. I do live alone. And so I haven't touched another human in 6 weeks. That's challenging. But at the same time, you know, even though I have the opportunity to give a lot of speeches and host a lot of events, people mistake me for an extrovert. There is a side of me that is very introverted and enjoys alone time. But it is difficult to enjoy alone time when you know so many people are suffering from a health standpoint, from an economic standpoint. But I try to do the best I can.
Yeah, there is a trend right now of people buying puppies. Maybe you want to get yourself, if your building can allow puppies.
I will tell you, both of my brothers, I would then become the third member of my family to get a dog in the last 2 weeks. They both have gotten dogs. It is
What
absolutely
did they
happened.
get? What kind of dogs did they get?
They've got something poos.
Well, that's what we have. Ours is a Labradoodle.
Yeah, like little dogs. Look, they did it. Most of their kids are going through a tough time, right? They can't see their friends. A number of them have had birthdays over this period.
Yeah.
And then there's camp. And so the kids had always wanted a dog. The parents had always resisted. But it is heartwarming to see things on the news about shelters and other places that are now completely empty because people have taken to adopting pets.
So tell me about WorkMarket. I've always been super curious about the company. I've known about it for a while. What is it? And I know you were acquired in 2018, as I mentioned in the intro, but how has that changed the business?
So, WorkMarket is an enterprise software platform that enables corporations to manage their freelancers. I started the company in 2010. It's our 10-year birthday coming up in another few weeks.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. I did not think that it would be around this long, nor I would be here this long, but we have both persisted. Look, we were super fortunate with WorkMarket. We had a great team. We had a great group of investors. We raised about 60 million in venture from Union Square Ventures, Spark Capital, SoftBank, and
Wow.
we were helping companies to organize, manage, and pay their freelance population. And as companies engage more and more freelancers, that became increasingly important. Our friends at ADP had a vision of the world where companies managed all of their talent in one place. Your full-time workers, part-time workers, temp workers, freelance workers, all in one dashboard. And they are the best in the world at full-time workers, not just from a payroll standpoint, but from a HCM software standpoint. But
Hmm.
they did not have anything in the on-demand world. And so they looked all around and interviewed hundreds of companies and ended up with us being the best of breed, which I obviously completely agreed with.
Yeah.
And so they made us an offer we couldn't refuse. And I will tell you, of all of the many blessings of being a part of the ADP family, none is bigger than being a part of such a huge ship that has been around for 70 years, is one of the largest, most well capitalized companies on the planet. My heart goes out to my friends that are running startups now, that are venture backed, and all the difficult decisions they have to make, which we don't because we're a part of ADP.
Okay, so tell me about how things have changed for you since you've been acquired by ADP. I know that you said that it's like the big kind of robust machine behind your company, and they've been around for 70 years, but what are you getting out of that relationship right now?
Look, being a part of an organization that has 800,000 corporate customers, that
Yeah, wow.
800,000 corporations use ADP, um, the scale of that is mind blowing. We came in to that acquisition with 6 salespeople. Six. That was the size of our sales force. There are now 6,000 people that are
Wow.
trained on the work market product out there talking to companies about it.
And how has that changed you as a leader? Because now you have to be nimble.
Yeah.
You were a startup guy and now you're a big company guy,
Yeah.
ish.
Ish.
So how has that changed your approach? Like even right now, trying to keep your team motivated and feeling connected and
Well, a few things come to mind. One is, when I was a startup guy, the venture capitalists would always say to me, you're an operations guy. You're not really a visionary because, I was the co-founder of WorkMarket. My founder was the visionary guy, and I was the guy that made the trains run. And, now that I'm in a big company, they say to me, you're not really an operations guy. You're a visionary guy. And so it's all the context in which someone's looking at you. Um, so look, I have said to many people at the work market team, look, people go to startups because they want massive growth and they want to learn in that environment. And so there's always the concern when you get bought that a lot of your team leaves. I mean, they all just got paid out, right? You're all there for the lottery ticket, and the lottery ticket got cashed. So now they want their next lottery ticket. And I said to them, you guys would be foolish to walk out the door because you are going to get to watch as big, incredibly well run company fixes everything we did. Now, look, everything we did worked, but it worked in a way that worked for a few thousand customers, not for hundreds of thousands of customers.
right,
And
right.
so, if you really want to learn how to scale, you need to be here for a couple years and watch as big company fixes everything we built. And you being able to go to an early stage startup and say, hey, I built it. I watched big company fix it. Now I know how to build it again from the beginning. That is a very unique experience. And I, quite frankly, am getting that experience as well. So
Yeah, very cool.
if I leave to start another company, I will take the experience of how do I build it from the ground up better. The
Yeah.
other thing that has come to mind during this time is that startup CEOs, we're, and I don't want to overuse this term because I think it's not correct in so many ways, but everyone is using this notion of a wartime footing and a wartime CEO, and it's not respectful to those men and women that are actually fighting actual wars. But let's stay with that example for a second. Startup CEOs are wartime CEOs. We spend our entire lives a few weeks away from bankruptcy. Like, we are always worried about the survival of our companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, to see friends at large companies, even some of the people sometimes at ADP think, oh my gosh, what's it gonna mean? And they're operating in these very rapidly changing environments and customers going out of business and all this other crazy stuff. And to me, I'm like, yeah, this is, you know what I call this? Tuesday. This is
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, absolutely. Just another day.
This is what we live with as startup people, is that we are
Yeah.
always on a wartime footing. And so
Yeah.
that's been super interesting.
I'm sure. Yeah. And there's no such thing really right now. I got asked by a journalist this morning on a call what was happening as far as candidates being open. Are they more open right now to hearing from a recruiter? And I'm like, I think just people just feel like most people don't feel like they're on stable footing. And so usually that's the startup people, or it's big company, it's small company, it's mid-sized companies. Everyone's a little bit like confused right now about where they stand. And like you say, startup CEOs are used to that feeling. I love that. So pivoting to you personally and your book, what made you decide to write a book? I know it's called The End of Jobs.
It is.
So that has me intrigued. What is it about exactly? And without any spoiler alerts, because we want to read it, we want everyone to read it. What are some of the key takeaways, and why should people be reading it right now?
Sure. So, I would say I've been writing this book for 6 years. It was 6 years ago that I first decided to write something. It was on the encouragement of our marketing teams and of various people that I spoke with at conferences. And they said, oh, you should take all this great information about the on-demand economy. You should write a book. And I thought, okay. And so the book has taken so many twists and turns over that period. The key takeaways from the book are that we need to look at the history of work to understand what changes companies have gone through, workers have gone through, specifically at the points in time where there have been huge increases in technology, big technological advances. Things around the industrial revolutions that have occurred around mechanization, electrification, and computerization, huge step functions in technological change, that so much productivity increases had occurred, that so much power went to companies and the balance of power between workers and companies. And that becomes important to understand in a historical context, because we're going through another change now. The robots and AI represent the fourth technological step function we've seen as a society. Some people call it the fourth industrial revolution. Our friends at the World Economic Forum call it, fourth industrial revolution, and they're doing a lot of great work and study on it. Regardless of what you call it, companies and workers, and therefore society, needs to rebalance, because these changes are happening now. And so the main takeaway of the book is, what can we learn from the past in order to predict the future?
And so what can we learn? We don't want you to give away the whole thing, but what do you think people should be thinking about?
So, I talk a little bit in the book about one of my favorite quotes from history, which is, if machines improve but a little bit, there will be no more need for human labor. Shauna, do you know who said that?
I don't.
Plato said that in the Republic. And so this is a challenge that humanity has thought it was going to face. And so the main, conclusion of the fourth industrial revolution, or I actually call it the first services revolution, is we're going to go through this change. And as we go through it, there will be the doomsayers, as there always are. Oh my God, all the jobs are going to go. And people will overreact to headlines, as we tend to do. But we will end up in a much better place, as we have in each of the other industrial revolutions.
Absolutely.
But, and here's the big but, people gloss over the transition that occurred in each of those industrial revolutions. Yes, we did end up in a place with higher standards of living and more jobs and everybody better off. but the transitions were really difficult. Communities were left behind, classes of workers were left behind, people were terribly abused. There was literally blood in the streets. And so let's not pretend these transitions are easy, and let's not pretend that we do them well, because we don't. And
Mm-hmm.
so while I actually predict in the book that there will be no net job losses, again, repeat, no net job losses from robots and AI, there will be 15% of jobs eliminated from robots and AI, but new jobs will be created. But it's the retraining of workers that is, to me, the big challenge of our time.
Mm-hmm.
How do we go and take the people whose jobs will be eliminated and train them for the jobs that will either be created, new jobs we never even thought of, or industries that will grow? Because as a society, I would argue we have a responsibility to retrain those workers and to help those left behind, because it is just for the betterment of all of society.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
so,
gosh, my brain right now, Jeff, is going ding, 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 ding. The mommy side of my brain is like, okay, what do I need my kids to be making sure that they're learning and thinking about? The
knowing how
other
to
side of
code,
well, knowing how to code. They just don't, they're not feeling it. I'm tried. They're like,
I've
eh.
tried with my nieces and nephews.
They're
They
like,
don't.
eh. But no, I completely agree. But then there's the other side of me that's like, people talk about recruiting as an industry being replaced with AI, and machine learning. But I'm like, what am I uniquely situated to do? And that's the nuanced stuff that only humans can do and feel and
Yes.
smell and touch that you can't really teach.
Well, it's interesting because as a part of the book, we are doing something called the Future of Work Challenge, where I've gotten 20 of what I think are the most interesting, thought-provoking thinkers on the future of work. Former head of the largest labor union in the country, former CEO of the largest
Oh,
staffing firm in
interesting.
the country, CHROs of some of the largest companies in the world. Each of them has written their essay on what the world of work looks like in 2040. And I am
Okay.
putting up a $10 million prize for whoever is the most correct. And in talking to each of them, I always ask the question, what advice would you give to somebody that is just beginning their career to most prepare for the world of work? And their answer has actually been pretty uniform. And it has just been, be prepared for constant change, that the rate of change is changing and people have to constantly be in a continuous learning mindset.
Yeah.
The jobs of today will simply not be the jobs of tomorrow.
Yeah. You got to be able to pivot. You got to be nimble. You got to be flexible, and you got to be able to adjust and adapt.
Without
That's an interesting takeaway. I don't know that I would have thought that would have been the response.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see who gets the $10 million. You just got to have it in the piggy bank for when that occurs.
I have set aside a chunk of money. It is not exactly 10 million, but in theory, based on certain interest rates and compounding, it will grow to that amount on January 1st, 2040.
Wow. Okay. You're multifaceted. Do you think that there's a weird timing right now around what you do and your book and all of it kind of coming to fruition right around this time, that's like nobody knows left from right, and they're looking to people like you to help them anticipate some sort of something as far
Uh,
as the future?
no question. I mean, look, the number one question I always get asked now is, well, how is COVID changing the future of work? And
Yeah.
so, we're doing a webinar next week or coming up about that issue exactly with ADP. And so,
I definitely am gonna tune into that, because I am just curious, like, how is this gonna affect us as far as remote work, as far as freelance work?
well, I'll tell you this, Shauna. One of the main focuses of the book, one of the undertexts, I should say, is we need to use data. So many people take jump points and just go with it. And the example I talk about a lot in the book is when I first started WorkMarket, everybody said that by 2020, 50% of the labor force would be on demand. And I started WorkMarket in 2010, so in 10 years. And there are a few important points about that. First, we need to know that the on-demand labor market at the time was 25 to 30% of the labor force. One important point: no change has ever occurred that rapidly in the labor force, ever. Two, the on-demand labor market had not grown that much over the preceding 10 years. And so as people make those predictions, they were making them based on no data. And you have to be super, super wary in the world of labor statistics when anybody makes some overarching, mass prediction, because they're very rarely come true. And so when people say, oh, how is COVID going to affect the future of work? The right answer to that question is, I don't know, right? Like, there's just not enough data. Will companies massively move to remote? No, they will not. Will they move to remote in a quicker way than they were going to do before the crisis? Definitively, yes. There are so many interesting things about the comeback plan, and a lot of people are working on some very interesting things around that. I mean, you need to think about everything. You need to think about childcare
All
if
of
the
it.
schools aren't open still. You need to think about elevators. How do you get people up into buildings if you really only want one or two people in an elevator at a time? You certainly aren't going to jam a bunch of people in, even if they're wearing face masks.
Yeah.
So the getting up and down in the elevator may take a half hour now. So
Yeah. So it's like, might as well work from home. Yeah.
yeah,
Productivity is going to be super interesting.
but
And I think innovation is going to be interesting right now too.
I don't know. Well, look, this is where data becomes really important. And so 10 years ago, 2% of the labor force worked remotely. That was the totality of the people working more than 50% outside of the office. So they could be completely working from home, they could be hoteling, they could be, whatever. That increased to 3% prior to the crisis. So 3% of labor force, that is a 50% increase over a 10-year period. That's actually a huge increase in the world of labor statistics. We don't see things grow that much. That was driven by things like Zoom and Slack and all the things that people are getting to know now that enabled that. And it was usually driven by a pull, meaning it was the worker saying, hey, can I work remote?
Yeah.
When companies didn't like it for a few reasons. One, we had bosses that just would say, I just think everyone should be in the office. That was their rationale. I
Yeah.
just think that. It was driven by the fact that companies didn't have the infrastructure to allow you to work from home. They weren't comfortable from a security standpoint, allowing you to VPN into systems. There were all kinds of issues around policies and procedures. Okay, all of that, has to be weighed against the fact that remote workers statistically are more productive, are more engaged, have lower attrition, cost you less. It costs the worker less. It's more environmentally friendly. The worker's happier. That's what all the
Interesting.
studies said.
Interesting.
So what you're going to see now is, instead of a pull where the workers are going to want this, you're going to start to see the beginning of a push. And so prior to the crisis, I had made the statement, remote work will continue to grow as a part of the overall trends on the future of work, but the low-hanging fruit has been removed from the system. And so maybe it grows another percent, so 33% growth over the next 10 years, gets to 4%. Now I would tell you, I think it's going to get to 8% over the next 10 years. And I think the majority of that happens in the next 3 or 4 years. And some people would say, oh my gosh, 8%, that's not that much. Again, let's use data. 42% of jobs in the United States can be done from home. That is the sum total.
So why wouldn't it be higher? Why is 8%?
Look, 8% is just, when you look at things like police officers and manufacturing jobs and massage therapists and
Oh,
haircuts.
so you're saying the whole, of course, I'm going to like corporate. Okay.
Yes,
All jobs. Yeah, no, of course.
jobs.
A lot of jobs just have to be.
42%. We
Okay,
are actually the
interesting.
highest on the percent that can work from home of any country on the planet. The highest
Interesting.
in the United States of America.
Interesting.
So if 8% are, that's to say that almost 25% of the people that could work from home, or 20%, are working from home. That's mind-blowingly high. And also keep in mind, when you go from 3% to 8%, that 5% increase in the labor force, you're talking about 8 million workers that used to go to an office that now will mostly not. Because again, the work from home definition is just 50% of the time or more.
Yeah.
So that is to say that
Interesting.
office space starts to compress, but you have to weigh that against the de-densifying going on in offices. That's the big word being used right now as companies talk about going back, is de-densifying. How do we
Yeah, I've had a
de-densify?
couple friends who are in commercial real estate ask me about that, my thinking around it. I certainly don't know. You're saying like if we have, right now we have 3,000 square feet, maybe we only need 1,200 square feet? Or are you saying like, hey, that we're going to have 6 feet apart?
I think the two may offset each other, is that the number of square feet per person is going to increase, but the number of people that you need square feet for may decrease. And so it'll
Interesting.
be interesting to see. But again, to the main point, we just don't know yet.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible that you have the advantage of all the data, and it's just like in your mind because you've been studying it for so long, and you've made a career of it.
I've got a
Um,
page of notes for me. I keep glancing at.
well, you've got your page of notes, but I'm saying like you're really in the thick of this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that most of the webinars that you're going to do and podcasts and different things that you're going to be talking about are going to be right in this. And the timing also of how you guys got involved with Volunteer Surge
Yeah.
is super interesting. How did that intersection happen and partnership?
Sure.
And what role do you get to play in this? Because that's also a way of feeling like you can actually do something right now.
You are 100% right in terms of, it's a way you could feel like you can do something. I will tell you, knowing that our team has a way to kind of help get into this fight, to help those on the front lines doing the most work, the doctors, the nurses, the other healthcare professionals, it has certainly boosted our team's morale to know
Oh,
that
for
we are doing
sure.
something.
For
And
sure.
so this all started with a very good friend of mine, Jonathan Dariani. Jonathan's a very talented ed tech entrepreneur, and he has a lot of online training programs. He had worked with the Saudi government when MERS broke out to help train 50,000 frontline healthcare workers. And he said, "Hey, I want to do the same in the United States, and we can use this program." And so he got a bunch of organizations, Amazon and Salesforce and LinkedIn, that were helping. And he said, "Look, we're going to do this training. We're going to train 1 million certified nurse aides to overflood the front lines. Jeff, I'm calling you because I'm asking for your advice. I need 3 pieces of software. I need a piece of software that can help organize all of these volunteers so we understand who has what skills and, a profiling structure. And then second, I need a piece of software to manage them so I can send them assignments, but the assignments have to match what's in their profile. So it needs to be a customized assignment form to send the work out, and they have to use their mobile phones to check in and check out. And then third, I need a way to pay them because we're hoping that these move from being volunteer assignments to paid assignments. And so can you recommend some software vendors that I can get on the phone with?" And I was like, no, I can't. I said, "I can just give you WorkMarket because WorkMarket does all of that. We help you organize, manage, and pay. And I will commit to you, even though I no longer have the authority to do that because I'm a part of ADP, that we will, not charge you anything and whatever." And then obviously I ran up the flagpole and it was resounding yes, super quickly.
That's incredible.
And then look, we were able to get this whole thing up and running in a few weeks. And the only reason we were able to do that is because for years we had been building the infrastructure on APIs on so many different endpoints, around the security on those APIs,
Mm-hmm.
around the configuration of our customers' data structures and field structures. If that work hadn't been done over the course of years, we wouldn't have been able to respond to this call. But over a few weeks, working with those teams, there's a company called Absorb, which is a learning management system. We built the APIs. There are thousands and thousands of people that have now gone through that training that have come into the labor cloud on WorkMarket.
Mm-hmm.
And look, it took us a few weeks to build it. It takes a worker at least a week to take all of the training to get
Yeah.
into
How long
the
is the
cloud.
training? How many hours do they need to
40
train?
hours.
40
It's
hours. And is this
about
all over the country? How do people
yes,
hear about it? Aside from us, of course, telling it
of
on this
course.
podcast.
Megan Kelly is leading the
Oh,
PR
that's
efforts.
great.
And so we've done a lot of PR, but it's just at volunteersurge.com. For some
Okay.
reason, that URL was available. So we were able to get it for $19.
Fantastic.
So we got volunteersurge.com. And so thousands of people have gone through it. There are now, or tens of thousands at this point. There are thousands of people in the labor clouds, and they are being
Mm-hmm.
deployed as we speak.
It's
To
amazing.
help at not only hospitals, but nursing homes,
Mm-hmm.
jails, other
Wow.
places where there are vulnerable populations where the nurse aides can be doing blood pressure and temperature and a bunch of other things so that the nurse practitioners and the nurses and the physician's assistants and the doctors can be performing higher skilled tasks and not
Right.
spend time on these tasks. But what's become interesting is that as we move to this next phase in our humanities battle with this virus, the next phase is going to be testers and contact tracers. as we start to remove lockdowns and start to monitor a population that's moving around, you need to identify somebody that comes down with a virus, which will still happen until there's a vaccine. And you need to be able to quickly identify who they've been in contact with, see if those people are sick, isolate them, and isolate everyone along those chains. And if you can do that effectively, which South Korea, Taiwan, and a bunch of other places have done already, you can help maintain our wellness while we move towards herd immunity and a vaccine. And so volunteer surge will hopefully play a role in that as well, because we're going to need about 200,000 people trained up on that task. There are currently at health care places around the United States, 2,000 people trained on that task. We will need about 200,000. And so volunteer surge will play a role in that as well.
This is incredible. I have like chills. This is amazing that you're able to do this, and this must make you feel really good. But I'm curious, are there any liabilities, not necessarily for you because you're just the conduit to make it happen, and but for volunteer surge, do they have to sign some sort of release? What if they get COVID while volunteering?
So any interaction through the WorkMarket platform, you have to go through the WorkMarket terms and conditions. And so there's obviously all kinds of liability waivers and things of that nature. We didn't change our existing policies. We didn't add anything. Everything was inherent in the way things work. But let me go back to the question in terms of, what am I doing? I will tell you, Shauna, after that initial phone call, I've done pretty much nothing. Like, it's this team at WorkMarket, our solutions engineering team, John Murcott, John Burgess, Clifton Alexander. These are the guys that are up all night, working 24/7, getting all this stuff up. My role was literally just to take the phone call and ask for permission up the chain, which I got in 2 seconds. And then
it's also you had the foresight to just quickly think, I want to give this. I don't want to charge for this. And B, you have the contacts, right, of the friend. So you are doing something, and it doesn't really matter what role. We all have a role to play. And so I personally think you should feel great. And I can't wait to get this podcast out for other people to know about it, because in Seattle, I'm sure there are tons of people that would love to get involved. So I'm assuming this is just national right now, right? It's just in the US?
Volunteer Surge is a US and Canada. The WorkMarket platform will enable it to go global when it is ready.
When it's ready. Okay, so you've got WorkMarket, you've got Volunteer Surge, you've got the combination of working with ADP, and I'm sure that your brain is going in a million different directions, just preparing for all these different speaking engagements that you have also. On a personal note, like, how are you said you're finding that you're maybe enjoying being a little bit more introverted, but how are you staying balanced?
I mean, look, I will not pretend that it has been easy for me. I mean, any problem I have, I am unbelievably conscious of how high class a problem that is. So I always kind of take that breath. But there have been a few things that have helped me remain, of a cheery disposition, helping me remain productive. The first is prayer. I get on my knees every night and I just say thank you, which is not a part of, Jewish theology. It is just a practice that I instilled for myself, just to say thank you.
Just recently, just since COVID, or like years ago?
I've been doing this for almost 20 years, just to get down and just say thank you.
Well, a gratitude practice, they do say, has a very strong link to happiness, regardless of the religious aspect of it. It's just more of a spirituality, feeling connected.
100%.
Yeah, completely agree.
100%. The other thing that helps me is helping others, and it's whether it's the people in my life, whether it's personal trainers or other people I work with that are really having an economic difficulty, and supporting them, continuing to pay them, giving them Christmas tips, now, and I will give them again at Christmas, but just say, hey, thought you could use this now. That's been, it is another thing that is documented, that if you help others, you end up just feeling so much better. You get
so much out of it. Absolutely.
And then, exercise, I'm doing 2-a-days. I used to watch YouTube, and I'd watch these videos on Marvel movies and other kinds of silly things. And you get trapped in like the YouTube rabbit hole where you watch one video and then it immediately starts the next video. You're like, I'll watch another. Turns out the same thing is true for ab workouts. if you put on an ab workout, YouTube starts the next ab workout right away. So you're like,
so you're working out on YouTube. That's an interesting.
I do use
Okay.
YouTube. Yeah. And then, look, one of the other just fortunate things that I have is Central Park on my doorstep. And so
Yeah.
I get into the park, I stay socially distant and take every precaution, but getting into the park and being around greenery has been a blessing.
Absolutely. When I lived in New York, I did not live near the park. I lived in Union Square. And sometimes I had that feeling of like, I love the city. I love the pulse. But certainly right now, when there's not that pulse, I would be craving what we have here in Seattle, green and mountains and water and at least green. So 100%, I would imagine that Central Park is offering a lot of calm energy right now.
Yep.
So I always ask this at the end of every podcast, and I feel like you kind of almost just answered it, but it's a different way of asking it. Like, what fuels you?
So having listened to some of your podcasts, I kind of knew this question was coming.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Amazing.
Oh, thanks.
I think about the things that kind of get me excited, and there are the things that fuel me, I think are, saying helping people is just a little too trite. It's specifically the people that are in my life that work really hard and haven't been given the opportunities that I've been given, right? I'm very conscious of the fact that I grew up in this amazing family. And yeah, look, I worked really hard for what I have, and I don't apologize to it for anybody. But I'm aware of the fact that there are people that are just as smart, that work just as hard, though, that couldn't get the internship at JP Morgan because, their cousin didn't know the guy.
Yeah.
And so helping those people, there are a few notes that I keep that I've received over the years. One specifically from a colleague's mother who wrote, "I don't know what you saw in my daughter, but if you hadn't done the things you had done, first in hiring her when there were 10,000 people that wanted that job, and then coaching her, and now she has not a job, she's got a career. I don't know where my daughter would be if she hadn't met you. And I can't thank you enough." And there's all these things, and I was crying while reading it.
Of course.
And I reread it every now and again, and that's what fuels me, is knowing that I was able to make an impact, but I didn't make an impact out of charity, right? I made an impact because this young woman works her tail off.
Yeah.
And she's got a great attitude. And so for people that, say, hey, what else can I do to help? And people that are there first thing in the morning and their last day at night. And again, being in the office is not necessarily a representation of productivity, but they're working all the time and they are busting their butts. If I can help those people, that's what fuels me.
Yeah, I love that. And that one note from that one mom is probably, that's what you have physically and tangibly. I'm sure there's others, but imagine how many people you've touched that you might not even be aware of because they haven't said those words to you. Just knowing that you're in that mindset, I'm sure that you are mentoring without realizing it a lot of people. And I feel like now I've got you in my little trusted circle of people that I can call on, because I'm sure this is going to be an ongoing question. So I may have you back on. We're going to see where we are. I wish I could be in on the 10 million thing. 2040.
Well, hopefully by 2040, 10 million doesn't mean what it means today. But
are you kidding? I'll take it. Anyway, thank you. Have a great weekend. I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Such an honor to be here. Thank you for everything that you do. Yeah. Stay safe. Be well.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.